that though, we've got our friends at Twitter, returning sponsors and great supporters, like the others, of course. But today we've got Daniel Charnas, vertical marketing lead for automotive over at Twitter. And I'll let Daniel get prepped here. How are you doing there, sir?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to your session. I think it's 3 lessons for automakers from 1 year of conversations. Is that what we're looking at?
That's about right. So let me see if I can share my screen. And let me know if you can see the presentation screen properly.
Yep, you look fantastic. Looks great, man.
All right, thank you so much. Well, I know we're a little behind on time, so I'm gonna keep us in the fast lane here. I promise, no puns, but it's very difficult.
We don't feel rushed. We look forward to it, and take it away, my friend.
Of course, of course. So, as others have noted, it's been a really exciting time for the auto industry. After a year unlike any other, I think we can safely say our relationship with our cars has changed. And we're noticing that in the conversations people are having on Twitter. Some are buying cars for the first time in their lives, sometimes in places where cars have never really been a thing, like here in New York. Others have been introduced to new cars in entirely new ways as automakers have swapped auto show reveals for virtual events held on social media. And others continue to dive headlong into the conversation about the future of mobility and what that holds. Today, people aren't just buying cars, they're reimagining the role that cars play in our lives. And those conversations are happening in plain sight, where we can observe and learn, and most important, adjust our strategies so that we're not just joining the conversations at the right time, but anticipating where the conversations are going so we can meet them with the right message. So today, I'm going to talk about 3 major lessons for automakers that we've taken away from the conversations that are happening on Twitter. We'll talk about how automakers are sparking a new kind of conversation when they launch a new vehicle in a virtual environment. We'll talk about the growing importance of culture and how brands are connecting to what's happening in culture. And finally, we'll talk about the fast evolving EV conversation and how automakers can join and, as importantly, shape the conversation about an electric future. So let's dive in with virtual launches. As many others have noted today, virtual experiences and especially launches may be here to stay. And from what we can see, there's a good reason for that. People like them. 60% of people on Twitter tell us that watching live streamed events brings them closer together. It creates an energy that makes them feel like they're experiencing something together. And that energy is captured in the conversations that are generated when automakers live stream their big reveals on social media. And in fact, today, conversation is the energy of an auto reveal. And it's so powerful that it not only energizes consumers watching the reveal live, but also the press who spread the word further. So for instance, GM recently came to Twitter to launch its new model of Hummer. And the campaign created an enormous wave of excitement, generating over 2,000 tweets in just an hour of the reveal, which drew 14 million plus viewers. And the model's pre-orders were sold out by the time the announcement finished. Last year, over 80% of automakers came to Twitter to live stream their reveals. And that energy, that conversation is what so many automakers discovered as they've recreated those tentpole reveals as virtual events. And we anticipate they're going to continue to do so because live streaming the reveal fuels conversation far beyond the crowds that were able to gather at an auto show, as fun as it was. These conversations reach the entire world at once and are a powerful way to become part of the cultural zeitgeist. So speaking of being part of the cultural zeitgeist, 2020 was a year of massive upheaval for nearly everyone in the world, but it was also a year in which cultural conversations, trends, major shifts were felt prominently on social media. And it was a year when we learned how important it is for brands to show up in those moments, whether it was Chase showing up to host a virtual commencement for those who couldn't celebrate their graduation ceremonies in person, or Verizon hosting a virtual concert series to raise money for local small businesses. People told us that a brand's cultural involvement, their cultural relevance, factors into their purchase decision. And in fact, we've learned that cultural relevance comprises an entire quarter of a consumer's purchase decision. Price and quality and brand ratings, those still matter, but those are determined by market dynamics and are more difficult to impact. But investing in a brand's cultural relevance has become an even more important way to build loyalty among an increasingly undiscerning audience. And this extends to in-market auto buyers. This is both on Twitter and off Twitter, our research found, who are telling us that cultural relevance matters and factors into their consideration. And this is true no matter which aspect of culture the automaker leans into. So whether automakers are supporting social issues that matter or simply aligning around tentpole cultural events, consumers tell us that cultural relevance matters. But auto as an entire category is operating from what we might describe as a cultural relevance deficit. When we looked across a range of industries from entertainment to consumer tech, even retail and CPG, auto by comparison was simply not viewed as being culturally relevant. So we decided to dig a little deeper, and to better understand that dynamic and the role cultural relevance plays, we partnered with Sparkler, a research agency, who helped us break down some of the attributes that factor into a consumer's perception of a brand's cultural relevance. And what we found is clear. Cultural relevance doesn't just come from being in the market talking about the products you sell. It's achieved by becoming part of the cultural zeitgeist and joining, or even better, starting the conversations that matter in our society. And what became clear is that a brand's cultural relevance is defined by the cultural conversations that the brand chooses. And that's a key word, chooses to align itself with. Let's look at a breakdown of a well-known brand, Dove, which scored pretty highly in our cultural relevance score compared to other brands. So one of the first patterns to emerge is that consumers identify underlying cultural themes beyond the product itself, and they talk about it. So for instance, Dove makes soap, but has become much more as a brand than just a hygiene product through its active investment in the public conversation around body positivity, around gender equality, around racial diversity. Dove has become part of a much larger cultural conversation on what it means to be beautiful, to feel beautiful. Now, let's look at auto as a category. When people think about cars, they're thinking and talking about cars. They're thinking about makes, they're thinking about models, brand reputation, but they're not so much talking about automakers and identifying automakers with key themes driving our culture forward. So how do you build cultural relevance? There are three key cultural relevance levers, we'll call them, for automakers: aligning with cultural events, promoting social issues, and promoting trends. And how you do this can vary drastically depending on the brand and the conversation that you're looking to join. For example, Honda, as Melissa and Ian were just discussing, expanded its audience base by sponsoring the League of Legends Championship Series and connecting to Twitter's audience of gamers. Hyundai responded in the height of the COVID crisis by offering additional financial assistance to those struggling to make car payments. So they were showing up in a big cultural moment that mattered to people. Ultimately, consumers are looking towards automakers to show up in the moments, the issues, and the trends in conversation. And there's a value across the funnel to be found in doing so. Now, speaking of trends, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the elephant in the room, which brings us to our final topic of the day. The final theme of the past year and what we'll end on today has been electrification. Right now, the auto industry is on the verge of changing the way that we interact with motor vehicles. And as we know, for many consumers, that change is unsettling. I mean, think about it. You're not just asking people to buy a new car, you're asking them to come along for the ride as you reimagine what a car is. And as Kim was just saying before, the adoption of electric vehicles isn't just going to happen because you roll a vehicle off the line and say it's ready. It's going to take a major conversation between automakers and consumers. And the good news, from what we're seeing on Twitter at least, is that consumers are already having that conversation. More than a third of Twitter users are reading and talking about EVs with others. And nearly 3/4 of in-market Twitter users see EVs as the future of mobility. And they've also told us that they are ready for you to be part of that conversation. So when we ask Twitter users what they want to hear from OEMs who are producing EVs or getting ready to market EVs, they say that they want to hear about everything from charging stations to new tech and ways that the products are addressing environmental challenges. What's more, this is a conversation that you can already begin to shape and where you can already drive impactful metrics, even if you don't have a car in market. So looking at GM, who came to the conversation in a bold way at the Super Bowl this year, their campaign alone was responsible for driving a nearly 200% lift in the amount of people talking about EVs on Twitter. And they weren't even talking about a specific vehicle at the time. So whether you're in market with a new electric vehicle or priming the market for a future vehicle, now is the time to begin bringing your voice into the conversation, because the conversation is already happening and you have the ability to shape it. And that's a great note to bring us back to where we started today. The conversations that people are having about cars, about their relationship to cars and to mobility in general, that's happening right in front of us. And the answers to where we've been, where we're going, and how to get there can be found by listening to that conversation and planning now for how you join and shape it. Now's the time to be sparking conversation with virtual launches, to think beyond the four doors of the vehicle and join the cultural conversations that are shaping our world. And finally, to enter your voice into the new arena, the future of electric mobility. Because whether you're ready or not, the conversations that shape our industry are happening now. Thank you so much for the time today. Feel free to follow me at Charnas Daniel, and I'll provide my email address so we can follow up with more of the research on cultural relevance in particular.
Wow, well done, Daniel. That was, I mean, to the second, I think. You are well-versed, my friend. Also, I have to say, I think that was about 40 slides, and in the vein of Twitter being, truncated content in terms of messaging, you did it. You did it right on time. It was great.
Try to be punchy.
Yeah, exactly. No, hey, thanks so much for doing that. Really appreciate it. And yeah, please do share your contact information if you don't mind into the chat box there, and folks can get in touch with you.
Of course, will do. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was great.